Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well this Monday, 25 September 2023. We meet today to talk about BTC, to talk about crypto, to talk a little bit about macro, but just a little bit. We're going to talk about JP Morgan. We're going to talk about the bearish acceleration that we experienced last night and this morning. We will understand all of this, and it will start right away. We'll start right away with Terra Luna, in particular the classic Terra Luna community. So as a reminder, Terra Luna was a protocol, an algorithmic stablecoin that fell a year ago, a little over a year ago, in May 2022, leading to a liquidation of an ecosystem of more than $42 billion. So something that's really impressive. And they have those who still remain on Terra Luna Classic, those who maintain the network, what we call the lunatics, well, historically are still present and trying to reassemble the network. And they are trying to repair what happened in burning a certain number of Lunases, because you have to understand that the principle of Terra Luna was to destroy Luna and then create UST. Something that led to very strong action, because the opposite implies that to destroy UST, we must generate Luna. And the Luna was generated algorithmically to be able to maintain the peg. So that is to say the value of the UST at 1. And what resulted, Luna's monumental creation, I think we're over 6 trillion, something like that. Finally, it's really impressive, the number of existing Lunas. And to know that since the creation there has been, well, since the crash took place, there has been only 1% of burn that has taken place. And that's it. The ecosystem has voted for the disappearance of the USA, of the algorithmic stablecoin, which is linked. So all that remains is the ecosystem with the Luna present. We will have to see what burning system they will put in place to be able to try to reassemble this network. Personally, I tend to tell you that this is something that will not come back, or in any case, the people who are present on this network, there is a part who will disappear, a part who will remain. But all in all, there will be very few people who will come to rebuild on it. There are very few people who will come to invest in it. It's a good decision, but will it be enough? It will be worth seeing. Then we have an article which is offered on CoinDesk, which is quite interesting and which explains how remarkable it is to hold the 26,000 given the crash we experienced on SPF 500. And I invite you to say it because, well, there is technical analysis which is relatively poorly done, but there is a whole analysis which is carried out on the representation of the DXY and the SPF 500 and the correlation between both, between BTC and precisely these two assets. And we see, in fact, that there was a big correlation in particular in 2021 and 2022, a correlation which collapsed the further we advanced in 2022 and more we move forward in 2023. And it's something that I have already defended for a while. And it's true that it's remarkable to hold the levels that we are holding, even though we had a crash on the SPY 500 and the NASDAQ, and we will discuss it precisely in the technical analysis. In a few moments, we are just going to do a little point on the macro to know what awaits us this week. You will see that we still have quite a few things. One, we are going to have the guard speech today. Well, we are not going to hide that it is going well. Be nothing in terms of impact. On the other hand, we will have elements. Important, we are going to have the Confluence board, which is going to arrive. We are going to have the sales of new homes in August. This will be closely monitored because real estate in the USA is really a very important sector. Then we will have the consolidation of the Q2 of GDP. It's going to be really important, in which we already know that there were a certain number of problems in the calculations of GDP, particularly in 2021 minus 2022. Will there be a readjustment of GDP in the TT2 quarter? It will be interesting to see, yes or no, we will surpass the 2.2, which have been decided. Then we will have the sales promises. We will have Powell who will discuss. So on Thursday, 28, we risk having a few people, especially since it is at 22, so it remains relatively late. And we will potentially be heading towards the closure of the American markets, so we have a lot of things that are likely to happen on 28, and then we have Friday 29, in which China is closed. But above all, we have the CPI core September D Europe, which is falling, and then we have the validated core PCE for August consolidated. So there we are going to have a lot of potential movements compared to this week. So something which is relatively important, especially since on Saturday we're going to have the manufacturing PMI of China, in which we should have a return of activity. So in any case, this is what is expected by the market. We attack the technical part in which we have here the SPF 500 on the mini contract. We can clearly see the week that we had, which is catastrophic. We reattack upwards, but which is rather coherent in relation to that. We will have to see, are we going to retrace apart with an upward acceleration, or are we going to be in a process? Are we going to do something like that to retest the high parts here before sinking? Or do we continue to break down very strongly, namely that we are still in the dynamic of accepting the news from Jerome Powell last week, including a speech which was relatively aggressive and which was not positive? When we look here at the levels that we drew up last time, in which we have a level of retest, which will be interesting in the 4,435, why not go retest this part before sinking in, which would be completely logical for broken there? That is to say that the retest levels work quite well. Here we have a very nice entry for a very nice short and a bearish breakout. There, would we have a strengthening of the position for be able to cause the decline? Potentially, that is to say that the target here would be the 4,276 to fetch. And the big target, really the biggest, would be the 4,100 with the 1,618, which would correspond. In addition here to the retest of this area, so a macro, which unfortunately is relatively poor, we are not going to hide it with behind an oil, which is not positive either. We did a very nice retest of the 236 here. But for me, the question we will have to ask ourselves is, who am I long from here, this zone? So since the retest, do I cut my position and look for an entry in short or not? This is the big question because I find that the return is not powerful enough compared to the 236. Are we going to go back to the 618 or not? I don't have the information yet. I admit that I am going to really monitor the retracement that will be carried out because we have had a very nice rebound near and second. Here we are more in a form of retest, so we would be more of a double top dynamic, something like that. I think that the distribution there is relatively weak. We will not have a structural distribution, so we will have to look potentially in a small time frame in the 15 minutes to see if in this area, between today and tomorrow, we have a distribution. And at this moment, we will perhaps have a bearish acceleration set up in all cases. For me, I will have a real cutoff validation if we ever do this. That, and we retest here with a bit of structure, it is to say that we break. My resistance level, we are going to consolidate above. We no longer use support here, but resistance. And then we go deeper. There, I will have a really perfect setup to strengthen a short position. So it is something that I will aim with a target that would initially fetch the $83 and then the $80. Afterwards, are we really meant to look for oil lower down? There, basically, I want to tell you no. When we look at the production price versus demand, we should have oil, which should be in the 120 almost dollars. I think I will make a video on it at some point in a Saturday video. I started talking about it in the video last Saturday. But for me, it's interesting. It means that oil, yes, we are arriving in a very strong technical zone here of 93. But we have OPEC, we in Saudi Arabia, we have a lot of momentum, which is building. Create ourselves to be pushed upwards. And technically, we have targets which are also on the rise. We have very, very big targets which are at 107. We will discuss at a given moment how far we can go, but we can go relatively high in terms of oil. And knowing that it is a vector of economic struggle very strong in the fight against the West, particularly America. We must not delude ourselves that when we are in an increase in rates, which are very high, as is the case, in Europe and the United States, the fact of having very high oil prices and therefore very expensive access to energy reinforces inflation and reduces the movement capacity of these actors. And so there, we really find ourselves in this process. And that necessarily impacts actions. In any case, we can clearly see the VIX currently, which is the representation of the volatility of the SP 500 market. And above all, it is the representation of the options against the SP 500 market. So that means that it is a representation coverage of the actors who will be on the SP 500. And we see that we have a big increase over last week. And I think that we will continue in these increases. We should find a VIX in the 2022, 23, or potentially 25. So this implies that we will have relatively high volatility at the level of the SP 500 and other classic assets. Clearly, this is characterized as at the level of BTC. We see that we still had a last week really marked by indecision here, with this candle which really hurts, which is a candle which shows precisely here a bearish continuity for those who really know the Japanese songs elsewhere. Don't hesitate to put the name. I don't say it on purpose. Put the name in the comments. It's important. When we see that, we have to start asking ourselves questions just by reading a Japanese construction site. And when we are in a more classic reading, we say to ourselves that, yes, we still have a form of confluence for a bearish continuity, with here potentially a retest of the 25,200 or even a bearish breakout. And we see that we started this week quite aggressively. As a reminder, we are still in this dynamic where we have a large range, which is from 25,200 to here 30,000, in which we are in a small range here, in which we are in 26,782 to 25,200. Roughly, we see that we still have our little divergence, which is very present, bearish divergence, which is here in force, and to know that we still have our retest zone at 28,600, which we have already kept in mind for a very long time. We have kept it in mind since the breakout, so that is, say, mid-August. So as usual, we will take the time and we will be patient if we ever have a retest to make a new entry. Short term, we see that we are in a range. We had a small range, which is in a large range, and then we have the setup of another small range with liquidity behind it, which had been created in this very structuring upward acceleration, in which we had retested once, twice, three times with the breakout of this top of the range. And we see that we created liquidity, that we went to look for this liquidity. The fuse went exactly to look for liquidity, and that we are potentially structuring a retest here of the low level. That is to say 25,375 and potentially 25,000. With the low, which was here, the deviation, which was left here, which is a characterization of range trading, in which we will look for the upper equity. Here, the upper equity, bearish breakout, the lower equity, bullish acceleration. Are we going to have the same approach, or are we going to have an SP 500 which will drag us down and sink us? Namely, that we know that we have a reduction in the correlation, but this does not mean that we do not have a correlation. When we look a little at the order flow, there is not much that is moving. We see that we still have a contraction at the level of the top traders. Here I purposely put it in a large size to be able to clearly see this contraction, and therefore that means that we still have this indecision of the market. In any case, it is seen at the level of the funding rate, since we are in this form of lateralization of ranging. We have here a ranging also at level of top traders and funding rate, and we have an open interest, which stabilizes. We have no decision at the level of the remaining operator. If we go looking for liquidity, we see that we have started to tap into long liquidity, something that we have already been waiting for some time. I had said that the construction of long liquidity here was relatively important, and that at some point we were going to chase them away. Did we do a little bit before going to 28,000, 28,100? Potentially with the big target 28,600, to then make the movement. It was to be determined. There we see that we have started to make the first breakout, second breakout, and I think that we are going to replay the games potentially low here in the 25,380. Remember this level, what does it represent? Well, it simply represents here, if we take back our BTC, well, the bottom of the range, quite simply, okay? We are really at these liquidity levels, so we have confidence from the different levels. And for me, it is a little bit the target for today, even if we can have a small retest. It would not be illogical to have a bearish continuity here to retest this area. We're going to get 25,800 and then do a retest of the top and then break bearish. There, we would potentially have a very good entry if we also have a very good distribution of week off. At this point, we will have a perfect setup to accompany the course. Remember, we are not in trend, we are in range, so you have to adapt the way you trade or invest. We are in a lateralization. We are in a phase of lethargy. It is up to us to make the most of it. And by the way, speaking of enjoying it, I hope that you took advantage of it and that you will leave me a like and a comment. It always makes me very happy. And above all, it supports the work that I do every day. I made 3 big videos for you this weekend. If you don't have time to watch them, I invite you to watch them. I'll link them here at the end of this video, and we'll see you again to 1330 to talk about Jasmy, a token that I have already been talking about for a very long time, but I am coming back to it because there is a little bit of news. And above all, we need to understand the interest of the blockchain in the Internet of Connected Objects, and it's at 1330.